You really are, it's best not just to look at your IQ, but something called EQ, or emotional intelligence. Daniel Golmъn challenged our notions of what it means to be smart with his groundbreaking book, Emotional Intelligence. It focused on children and education. Now Golmъn looks at emotional intelligence in the workplace. His latest book is called Working with Emotional Intelligence. You have literally added a new phrase to our vocabulary, emotional intelligence, and that your research increasingly suggests that this is probably even more important than traditional measures like IQ. Give us some context. Give us a definition of what you're talking about with emotional intelligence.
Well, emotional intelligence refers to how we manage ourselves and how we manage our relationships, how self-aware we are, how motivated we are, whether we can handle distressing feelings effectively, how empathic we are, how well we can tune in to other people, or how socially skilled and able we are. That's what emotional intelligence means. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily more important than IQ, but it's certainly as important, and it's been extraordinarily underrated.
So this is more than just kind of being nice to your fellow workers or hanging loose and having a good personality.
Yeah, it's a misconception that this means being nice.
Right.
Actually, it might mean being blunt. Telling someone, bringing something up that they've been dodging, that they've been avoiding, but really is consequential, may be painful, but you've got to face it. That is most intelligent, if you do it effectively.
Right. Now, you walked over them fairly quickly, but that there are 5 skill sets that you've identified being the component parts of emotional intelligence. Review them for us quickly.
Number 1, self-awareness. Number 2,
self-awareness being knowing your feelings,
knowing what you're feeling and using your feelings as a guide.
Right.
You know, your intuition comes to you through a gut sense, and if you're going to make life decisions in keeping with your deepest values, you've got to listen to how it feels, as well as to what your rational mind tells you. So self-awareness is one. The next is managing your emotions. You know, do you fall apart under stress? Do you have temper tantrums? Do you say things to people you wish you hadn't said? So that's number 2. The third is motivation. Can you keep working toward your goals? You know, even when you have setbacks, nothing ever goes perfectly in life anyway. Right. And the fourth is empathy, knowing how someone is feeling without their telling you in words, because people don't tell us in words. They tell us in tone of voice or facial expression. Empathy is extraordinarily important. And then finally, social skill, how well you can handle relationships. How, you know, can you deal with conflict? Can you be the kind of person people like to work with or enjoy being with?
Now, this is more than kind of some new age notion that you just made up. In fact, it's based on neurology and an understanding that emotional intelligence is rooted in a different part of the brain than the cognitive.
That's exactly right, Alan. I actually came to this through covering neuroscience and psychology at the New York Times for 10 years or so, and I saw there was a critical mass of new understanding of how our brain is designed and what that means for our understanding our emotional lives and the relationship to cognition, to thought.
Right.
And basically the discovery is that the emotional centers of the brain, which are a more primitive part of the brain, they arose earlier in evolution, are involved in every thought, in every decision, and have different principles of learning, have the ability to kidnap or hijack the rest of the brain if they feel there's some kind of emergency or threat, and are enormously powerful in our mental lives, that they are orchestrated with the upper layers of the brain, the thinking brain or neocortex, and that an effective person has both of these circuits working in elegant orchestration.
Now, when people talk of being in touch with your emotions and empathy, you say, well, that's a female thing. You know, women have that. I mean, you've said this isn't the case, that men and women have the potential to have equal amounts of emotional intelligence.
Well,
different but equal.
Well, you know, emotional intelligence isn't one thing like an IQ score. It's a profile or a range of, you know, are you self-aware? Are you empathic? You can be highly empathic and self-aware, not very good at managing your feelings.
Right.
So we each have a profile of our strong points and our weak points and so on. If you look at women on average and you look at men on average, you have very largely overlapping bell curves with some differences, and the differences are interesting. Women on average tend to be better at than men at empathy, sensing how other people are feeling, which is a basis for handling relationships. Men, on the other hand, tend to be better than women on average at managing distressing feelings, anxiety and anger, and its self-confidence or motivation. So you could say it kind of averages out if you look at the whole pattern. The other important thing to realize is that unlike IQ, which is stable through life, emotional intelligence continues to be learned. It tends to increase on average over every decade of life.
Yeah, you use a fairly simple analogy. We kind of call it maturity.
We used to say, hey, as you go through life, you learn how to handle yourself a little better and get along with people a little better. That's what it comes down to. It is maturity. And the good news is, if you didn't get something, like you really are tuned out of people, or you fall apart under stress, you can learn at any point in life to get better at it.
Right. Now, you've taken your earlier work, which focused largely on children in the educational system, into the workplace. And in doing so, I mean, you've interviewed and analyzed